because it struck me. It struck me that if I didn't understand the foundations of American history, and which would lead to my study in Canadian history, but American history specifically, then I would not understand today's current events in the political realm, nationally, internationally, so on and so forth. And one must understand the whether the vision of America, what it was going to be through Protestant ideals, Protestant self-determination, was quickly infiltrated and steered, and is now being used. And matter of fact, I believe, as the team believes, that America is the beast that the great whore of Babylon, which is Rome, rides. America is the beast. But in Revelation 17, verse 15, then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kingdom of the earth. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Interesting. To whom do the kings, the leaders of nations, go to? Where do they go and kiss the ring or kiss the slippered toe? You've answered correctly. The papacy. Case in point, my own Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Jesuit trained at Brébeuf. Another example, Donald J. Trump, Jesuit trained at Fordham for 2 years before going to the supposed public University of Pennsylvania to complete his bachelor's. Both men, both went to Rome, both kissed the ring of Pope Francis, both received their blessing and their marching orders. How about Maduro in Venezuela? He received Pope Francis's blessing, and his opposition, forgive me, I don't have his name offhand, he is also Roman Catholic. It's interesting to note that Venezuela is also the home of current Jesuit Superior General Arturo Sosa. So back to this interview where I first heard Johnny Cerrucci. He said something very interesting, which actually I transcribed back in 2015. Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, these are the brains behind our founding generation. And our founding generation lived self-determination. The idea that before this it was all feudalism, it was the serfs, the peons, the campesinos, those little people, those peasants, they tilled the land, they fed the elite. There is an aristocracy of knights and lords, and amongst them is what we call the Praetorian class, the cops and the soldiers, and they protect the super elite, the tiny, tiny group of Luciferians at the top, and it's all very nicely insulated, and it's all the haves versus the have-nots. They are the original 1%, and we are the 99%. And for the first time in human history, there was an American experiment which talked about self-determination, and the binding document, a rule of law, not a rule of man, said that the common man can own property and defend it with his own personal firearms. Absolutely unheard of. And since then, the United States of America has been the chief target of the Counter-Reformation, or Jesuit order, of the Vatican and of Rome, and we are almost entirely under Rome's control right now. Well, that was 2015. Early 2015. If I'll post the link to, if I can find the interview, if it hasn't been deleted. Note in 2015, September 24th, a mission accomplished statement. Pope Francis I stood in the joint session of Congress announcing victory. Standing between the two Roman fasci, behind him, above him, in all caps, "In God we trust." Behind him, over his right shoulder, is the Roman Aquila, which is the staff with the Roman eagle, the symbol of where that staff or that the aquila is Roman territory. So do you think there's separation between church and state? And the way to get on the inside is Roman Catholicism, or to be screened and selected at a Jesuit learning institution, or prove your fealty to the devil's simulation by becoming a part of the Pedocracy, either by being buggered or raped, or by buggering or raping a child. You do that, you've proven your fealty, and you're in. Step out of line, you get the Harvey Weinstein or the Kevin Spacey treatment, or worse, the Robin Williams type or the JFK type treatment. Now, I was shocked at the material in Eaters of Children. It highly, highly disturbing. Like, it affected my personality, my psyche, my physical, my well, let's just say there is a lot of information and material for the push for veganism nowadays. You have different films, different sources that show absolutely horrifying material. The treatment of animals, throats being slit, the shedding of massive amounts of blood, dead, cadaverous animals being ground. That's what we eat. And that's into the animal kingdom. And what's being done to children, as exposed in Eaters of Children, is worse. So if you've seen these films, and a lot of people have, and have had severe physical responses, have gone vegan, try wading through this material about children. It affected me. Period. It just, yeah. But it also made me think of, imagine being the man, imagine being Johnny, who researched and wrote the book, who waded through the filth and the material, feeling called to do so, because that is what we are called to do as Christian men, to uncover and expose evil, and then to publish it, to speak about it, even when it's not popular and it makes others uncomfortable. Nobody likes to speak or hear about the rape and torture of children, specifically little boys. I believe the elite, the rulers, the clergy prefer little boys over little girls. I believe it has to do with power. I believe it has to do with something definitely very spiritual. The revered Edward Alexander Aleister Crowley called himself the beast and the world's most wicked man, who is idolized and celebrated, and who took over the British chapter of Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, a secret society based upon an amalgamation of the Templars and Freemasons, once said, "It would be unwise to condemn as irrational the practice of devouring the heart and liver of an adversary while yet warm. For the highest spiritual working one must choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory." Crowley, as we know, was obsessed with sodomy. Reading from page 7 of Eaters of Children, this sex magic, as Crowley would have it, spelling it with the K, magic, is conjured in the architecture of the Vatican, an obelisk phallus across from a dome or womb. The Egyptian version of the legend of Nimrod has a fascinating twist. The good god Osiris, or Nimrod, is murdered by his evil brother Set, or Shem, while his wife Isis, or Semiramis, manages to conceive his son Horus with him posthumously. It is this undead body part of Osiris that sprouts up the many obelisks around the world, and the most significant of them are erected across from domed structures that represent the womb of Isis. This pattern was cunningly duplicated by Roman Catholic Freemason Pierre Charles L'Enfant for Washington District of Columbia, and finalized with the greatly exaggerated phallic obelisk of architect Robert Mills. The mother goddess has taken on many forms through the centuries, Columbia being one of the more recent versions. What has been consistent, however, has been the connection to debauchery, fixation on reproduction, and proof of dedication by causing the innocent to suffer. These are all foundational to the devil's simulation. In Greece, the mother goddess Cybele was honored in such fashion. The most iconic example of blood sacrifice to Cybele was the slaughter of a bull upon her altar, known as the Taurobolium. The consort of Cybele was Attis, a youth who was so dedicated to her that he cut off his own genitals in her service. The voluntary or involuntary castration of young men became a key part of pagan rites. Such boys were presented to kings as cowed servants, guaranteed not to interfere with royal harems. These abominable practices go back to the dawn of quote-unquote civilization.